we had our malfunctioning Ursa G2 speedily replaced by Blackmagic design, and the new one's working without a hitch. What I want to talk about in this video, after over 6 months with these cameras, is what I love about the Ursa G2 in the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K, and what I would like to see improved, or what features I'd like to see added in the next iteration of these two cameras. I also reached out to the communities on Facebook and put a poll out on what features or improvements they'd like to see in the next generation of these cameras, and that's what we're going to talk about. Here we go. Okay, so bit of housekeeping real quick. I know this is not super aesthetically pleasing. We actually had our in-house projector replaced. This is the only room that our clients really see at our office, which has at the back a nice 4-meter projection screen, and they can sit on a couch and get comfortable while we're sitting back here working away. And our old full HD projector died. And we've replaced it with this new BenQ 2700 4K HDR one, but it doesn't fit the mount. So I'm waiting for a new mount to come in. So there's like 1 minute of totally unnecessary exposition for you. So now that that's out of the way, so our G2, initially, I don't know if you've seen the video before. The first one I had, it died on a commercial shoot. It went off, it got repaired. When it came back, the monitor was malfunctioning a bit. Not very often at first, and I thought it might have just been a firmware thing, but it happened more and more and more. I requested a replacement. I got one. It was processed really fast. I'm very thankful for that. And this has been on a solid 3-day shoot, worked without a hitch. So yeah, very, 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 very happy with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the Ursa, go through what I love, what I'd like to see improved or added, and then share what the community's opinion was, and then I'll go through the same with the 6K. If you want to jump straight to the 6K, I'll provide a link below to the time code so you can jump straight to that if you don't care about the Ursa G2. All right, the number one thing, maybe not the number one, it's hard to fully rank in order of, what I like most, but about the Ursa G2 is the fast read speed of this sensor. And that's only magnified when your B cam is this thing, which has a slow sensor read speed, but we'll talk about that later. One of the upgrades that they had from the G1 to the G2 was a much faster sensor read speed, and that also meant the ability to shoot at much faster frame rates without cropping. And in the case of G2, that meant 4.6K, 120 frames per second. It's freaking awesome. But even when you're not shooting in those fast frame rates, you see no really using this handheld, and I shoot handheld off the shoulder a lot. You don't see, you just generally don't see visible jello and skewing. I mean, you could if you're driving really fast past, straight poles and things like that. But generally speaking, you just don't see it. You just don't see it. And that's freaking awesome. Yeah, number 2 is just generally, and I'm not going to harp on about this, but the color science is beautiful. I came from red and I love that, but I'm just falling more and more and more in love with the color science of the Blackmagic design cameras, in particular, just how easy and it is getting really nice skin tones out of these. Beautiful. Number 3, in the internal NDs, just having them. I have a red/mirrorless camera background in terms of the cameras that I've traditionally owned in the past. And so just, and I've been pushing through that, even though I shoot a lot of documentary style content when you're in changing conditions. Being able to go to a camera that has that quick high frame rate button, I haven't listed that as a feature, and the ability to quickly change NDs internally is just fantastic. There is some issues with them, which I'll get into in the improvements. But But I find myself like a lot of the time, say I'm shooting, because I'm in Australia, I'll often opt to shoot 100 frames per second rather than 120 if I'm outside. And then my normal frame rate is 25 frames per second. And so 2 stops difference in exposure between those frame rates and those shutter speeds if I'm shooting at a 180-degree shutter, yeah. And what I love is if I'm outside, you know, I might be on whatever ND I'm on. When I go to high frame rate mode, I just drop that off 1 turn of the wheel, which is 2 stops of ND. And it's just so fast and quick and convenient. I love it. So you got clear, you got 2, 4, and 6 stops. Would it be great to have 8? I don't think you need 10. It would be great to have 8, but generally, you know, 6 is pretty good. But yeah, if it's blaring sun, it's not necessarily enough diffusion to shoot wide open, which sometimes I'd like to do. So hey, there's an improvement early. The other thing, the UI, the menu system on all Blackmagic cameras, awesome. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. It's really intuitive. It's really easy. It's excellent. 2 other ones. Number 5, amazing codecs, multiple flavors of ProRes, multiple compression options for Blackmagic RAW. Awesome. I think this is literally an industry-leading camera when it comes to codecs. My gosh, if Ari got Blackmagic RAW in there, you know, like a much more usable compressed RAW solution, whoa, game over. The other thing is, which I'll add on, is just the ability to record. I don't think I've got one in there. We've got the SSD recorder on the back of this guy. The ability to record straight to SSDs. You're talking, you know, we're going out on shoots, you might go away for a week, and having 2 terabyte SSDs to shoot on, the value, you know, the price, the amount of shooting we can do now without worrying about running out of space. It's it's been totally reliable for me so far. It's been awesome. So there's some of the key things, not the only things, but the key things that I love about this camera. But what would I like to see improved in the Ursa G3? The number one thing is IR protection on the sensor, particularly when we're shooting with NDs. Now I haven't got it on this camera, but we do have a raw light optical low pass filter with IR protection. And I almost feel like that's a must. Like they need a stronger optical low pass filter in this camera with really good infrared protection. I remember with red going from the MX to the Dragon sensor in the Scarlett W. It was night and day in terms of the improvement in infrared protection on that Dragon sensor compared to on the MX. Like you often just didn't need anything on the Dragon unless you were NDing really, really, really heavy. It was amazing, and I remember looking back at old MX footage when I put ND on and I hadn't used any IR filter. And it's just, you know, it's just this brown, horrible thing. So with this, even with the raw light optical low pass filter at 6 stops outside, I still see some IR contamination. And that's even worse without it. We're going to test that next week, and we're going to post a video about it. So keep an eye out for that. But that's an, you know, I know it's not a big selling feature, right? Yeah, it's not like 8K, full frame and all these kinds of things, but it's something that is holding the camera back from a general usability. And yeah, just, you know, because the color science is beautiful, just protect it. Protect the beautiful colors, please. Number 2 will just be quality control. So obviously my experience is just my experience, and your experience may vary. You may get 5 Blackmagic cameras and have no issues with them malfunctioning and everything. But my first one of these that we got, it died on a commercial shoot, not good. And then when it came back, it was malfunctioning and the screen was turning off or turning pink or turning gray. And they've replaced it, and this one's had no issues so far. So fingers crossed, no issues. But I would happily pay 10 to 15% more for the same camera if I knew without a doubt that thing was going to be rock solid reliable for years. QC, guys. QC. Now, this is not necessarily a feature that I'm desperate for or that I would use a lot, because I love that kind of wanky kind of manual focus, like, you know, handheld kind of slow motion shooting and stuff. I really like shooting that way for the kind of branded content stuff that I shoot a lot of. But just the way the industry's going, with Canon and Sony and kind of everyone, not everyone, but big players, you know, really making autofocus a standout feature, particularly Canon's dual pixel autofocus, and Sony isn't far behind. I don't think it's a feature that Blackmagic can afford to ignore, especially considering who they're sort of who they're catering to. You know, I think there are a lot of, you know, one man or woman band shooters that shoot on Blackmagic cameras. But one of the really handy things, the most handy feature to me of autofocus is being able to sit down and shoot an interview, open that lens up wide open or close to, and have confidence that you can sit next to the camera with your eyes totally focused on the person that you're interviewing, and not needing to check on that monitor that your talent is crisp and in focus. And you know, I mostly shoot in 2-3 person crews when I'm doing that documentary style shooting, so it's not so much of an issue. But I can see how it's a feature that at times I would use, and I wish I had the option to use. You know, otherwise, if you're on your own, what you can end up doing is stopping down more to give them more, you know, give the talent more room to stay in focus. But then, you know, you'll lose the aesthetics of the shot. You know, so yeah, I just think autofocus, I think they need to, you know, I don't know how that would affect price, but I think it's a feature they need to explore. I don't think it needs to be on the level of Canon's dual pixel autofocus, just a good face tracking autofocus for interviews. That's what I'd love to see. The next, and this isn't an improvement, but a new feature is also another industry trend, and that's going full frame. I think what Canon's kind of doing between the C300 Mark III and the C500 Mark II is a really good strategy, where they have this excellent Super 35 model in the C300 and this incredible full frame option in the C500. And there's some things about the 500 that are better. There's some things about the 300, such as 120 FPS, full sensor. On that camera. So whether Ursa went to a Super 35 and a full frame, or there was a new full frame line, I would find it really hard not to buy a Blackmagic camera with Blackmagic color science, with good IR protection, with a full frame sensor that gave me 120 FPS. I'd be like, take my money, take my money. And can you imagine all of that with like okay face tracking autofocus? They could charge a lot more than they do for this, and it would still fly off the shelves, in my opinion. So full frame, I know we don't all need it, and then yeah, we're all gonna have to try. We won't be using our 18 to 35 Sigma glass as much, but I think that's a place that I hope Blackmagic goes, because although it's not needed or necessarily wanted for and it's not right for a lot of projects, I think that very shallow and that beautiful aesthetic of full frame is a really handy tool, and it's an aesthetic that I think a lot of clients just respond really well to. My next one would just be an improvement. I'd love to see an increase in dynamic range, mainly in highlight latitude. I think it's already very good. If you're a red shooter, I'd say it's somewhere between the highlight latitude of the Dragon and the MX, closer to the Dragon. Closer to the Dragon, but not quite. That's very just me saying generally from just working with this, because I didn't have them both at the same time, yeah? I'd like to see an improvement in ISO performance, perhaps dual native ISO sensor. And to be honest, of all these new features that I'm talking about, that's the most likely to see implemented because it's already been implemented in the pocket cameras. So I'd see that is probably going to be a no-brainer that that's coming. An extension of that is I'd like to see more consistent color performance across the ISO range. That's something that I think Canon does really, really, really well. Maintaining performance above and below middle gray and maintaining color consistency for longer the further you get away from your native ISO. It's not a huge thing. I'm almost always shooting it between 800 and sometimes popping that down to 400 in post shooting Blackmagic RAW. But I'm generally always shooting at the native ISO. I'm not using this as a low light camera, nor do I think it needs to be, though some improvement there can't hurt. Okay, and just in terms of the body, look, I don't mind the body. Yes, it is a bit of a bazooka with the SSD on the back and then a V-lock on the back of that. I actually quite like even where the XLRs are, because if you're going to put a mic up here, it's just boom, straight off. It's not hanging out to the side, because on the side, we've already often, if we're working with a soundo, we've got a Lynx on there and everything. So yeah, the body's quite good. I mean, the preamps are okay. They're not amazing. They're not bad, but I've used them heaps. But most jobs I have soundo that's recording externally. Just a couple of things. This screen should go all the way, please. Sometimes you're just sitting in, you don't have a heap of monitors there, like sitting in for the talent. You want to quickly check the shot. Be good to be able to turn around and do that. The other thing is where this wheel is, which you can use to adjust your iris. Often I find the screen is on this slight upwards angle, so you can stand behind it and look at it. But when it's like that, like you can barely get to this wheel. It's a little bit awkward. It's a small thing. It's a total nitpick thing. It's not a major thing, but changing that maybe would be cool. But if you just made it so the screen could turn all the way, yeah, totally cool. No worries. I'll forgive you. That's it on the Ursa G2. Now, look, I'm a newsreader now because I'm shuffling papers. I'm looking at this because I wanted to let you know, last time I checked, this is what the Facebook community, the Ursa G2 user group's opinion. I've got top 6 features here. Number 1 being called for, which was more than twice as much as any other feature, was dual native ISO. As I said before, I reckon that's definitely coming because the tech's there, they've got it, it's coming. Number 2, an increase in dynamic range. Number 3, they're with me, an improved optical low pass filter and much, much better IR protection. Number 4 was maintaining that 120 frames per second full frame, full sensor readout, no crop. So that's very important to people. I think, mate, that's a real killer feature. I think don't underestimate how awesome a feature that is of this camera. 120 frames per second, no crop, 4.6K. Number 5 was full frame, and number 6 was a body change. So some people wanted a body, but that wasn't in huge demand. But yeah, that's it on the Ursa. Just gonna check my Fuji isn't about to die. Let's talk about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. What do I love about this camera? Well, I think the first thing to remember is when we got this was $2,500 US or thereabouts. Now it's only $2,000 US. So all the criticisms that I'm going to give this camera, just keep in mind how ridiculously cheap it is and how outstandingly, ridiculously amazing the image quality is. Even if it was 2, 3, 4 times as much, the image quality is still outstanding. But it does come with many quirks. But again, yeah, just keep in mind ridiculous value no matter what. There's no comparison to this camera, other than maybe the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K in terms of image quality and the value you get with, all that ProRes in there, Blackmagic RAW, Super 35 sensor in the case of the 6K. Really great. Like the Ursa, my number 2 is really great menu system, very intuitive UI, very easy to use. Nice big screen's good too. Number 3, Blackmagic Color Science is really, really, really good. The colors are really nice. That's great. The codec options, Blackmagic RAW, ProRes, compatibility with a huge range of EF glass. I know the EF mount maybe isn't preferred by everyone because it's not as adaptable, but it is super common. And if you have a lot of EF glass or adaptable to EF glass around, really nice, easy kind of solution to have. And it's just, you know, because of how flexible it is, how common EF glass is, how flexible the codecs are, particularly the fact that it's got a really good compressed RAW internally, it makes it an outstanding B cam option to the Ursa, but it's also a wonderful B or C cam option to other camera systems because of the flexibility of the codecs in here. And it's got, you know, not outstanding, but, you know, quite good dynamic range. It's certainly better than a lot of mirrorless cameras. It's definitely not as much as like the Ursa or yeah, some other cameras, but it's still very, very good. It's a wonderful B cam to bigger cameras, which is how we use it. Absolutely, it's a worthy A cam as well, but does come with some quirks and doesn't have certain things a fully featured camera like the Ursa G2 has. So what would I most want to improve about this camera, having used this one? I've had this one longer than this, over 6 months. Number one, that sensor read speed is slow as shit. You know, you turn a little bit and you're gonna start seeing that jello and that skewing stuff. And it's not great. Like, one of the shoots I was on where this monitor started stuffing up on our old one of these, I had to shoot on this, and I wasn't rigged up for it. I had this there because it was just in case, and I was shooting handheld with it, and you could just and it was slow-mo as well, but you could just see, you can just tell when you're looking at that footage in the motion, it's like it's flopping around a little bit. So please, if nothing else, let's get this sensor speed moving faster. And look, again, at 2K, I cannot complain. I have no right to complain about that at this price. The value is ridiculous. It's amazing. And if it's on sticks and controlled gimbal moves, it's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. But Blackmagic could improve this and a number of other things and charge close to, maybe not double, but a lot more, and people would want it for those improvements. I would pay a bit more for some of these improvements I'm gonna list. That's my number one. Actually, I've said that's my number one, right? But I forgot my real number one, which is IR protection. There's none. Like, this thing is so susceptible to infrared. It's real bad. So I got one shot, I'll put it up, when I was testing these in a park, no ND on either, and you could see the Ursa, which at the time had the raw light optical low pass filter in it, not this Ursa, our old one. And I was wearing a grey t-shirt, and you can just see, the IR pollution on this thing, no ND. So with NDs, it's real bad. You've got to use really good NDs with IR protection, or using another IR filter in conjunction with them. But please, or have a model. Can we tier it? Have a model. It's like $500 more with like the brilliant optical low pass filter with IR protection. I think both of these could do with stronger just optical low pass filters to minimize or virtually eradicate aliasing. It was something that I never worried about on the Red, but to be honest, that side of it, I don't generally, I'm sure it might be there somewhere, but I don't generally visibly see it or notice it. But yeah, the IR, you really do. My number three then, if a faster read speed was number two, my number three would just be an increase in dynamic range. If we could see that, the native ISO, I mean, it's dual native ISO 400 and 3200, but at 400, you know, it'd be good to have more range in the highlights there. And then, so I found myself now shooting at 800, but then you've just got to be careful of those shadows because they can be susceptible to noise and you know, and you are shooting a stopover native. But you know, you kind of want to do that for that extra highlight latitude. So I would love to see a shift to, I guess, yeah, I'd like to see an increase in dynamic range, but I'd like to see a shift in the native ISO if possible to 800. And then prioritizing that highlight detail. And then if we can get a native 800 ISO, prioritizing also clean shadows. Yeah, I had a shoot where I was shooting inside. This was the one when this died, and I was shooting. I wanted this moody look to it, so I was exposing 800. I might have even pushed it to 1,000, which is too much, but I wanted a little bit of detail inside, but I was exposing so that I wasn't losing detail outside in the sky, because I wanted that moody look. I didn't want outside in the windows clipping. But I had to crunch the grade so much to hide the fixed pattern noise that I'd never seen before before that shoot, because I hadn't exposed in that way, which was, again, I'm not at the perfect ISO for it, but I think it would be valuable to have an improvement there. I just want everything, right? Okay, let's do it. Double the price, that's fine. Okay, a couple more features. Would continuous autofocus would probably be in more demand in this camera, because I imagine, I'm only saying this anecdotally, I imagine there's more single shooters, one-person bands out shooting with these, and I think that would be again, it's not a killer feature to me, but I don't think it's a feature or a trend that Blackmagic can afford to ignore. Full frame, would we see a full frame one of these? Again, one of these with some of those features that I listed in full frame, double the price, say $5,000, with Blackmagic RAW and everything. Ooh, that'd sell, I reckon. That'd sell. Big one, and this one, this is for Shane. This is the big one to him as well. To him more than me, is a new body. Although I can see how this is kind of cool if you were going to shoot like this, and it's very DSLR-like in its body design and familiar. The shape and the weight distribution is a pain for putting it on a gimbal. And I think having something that was a bit more narrow and a bit more symmetrical in its design might really help a lot of shooters who are putting these things on gimbals and things like that. Yeah, from the frustration I hear from Shane's office, he gets pretty frustrated. Setting the Ronins up with that thing. What did the community prioritize? There was an overwhelmingly clear priority from the community, and the number one thing last time I checked with 171 votes was for an increase in dynamic range in this guy. So read into that what you will, but more dynamic range, please. Number two with 108 votes was the camera body change, and for it to not be so wide. And I think that's going to come back to getting this thing on a gimbal nice and easily. Number three with 105 votes was for continuous autofocus as a feature. Number four was an internal ND IR cut filter. I 100% want to see better IR protection. I just don't see, certainly at anything remotely close to this price point, an ND filter built onto it. Maybe some kind of third-party ND adapter could be made. But maybe some new line between the Ursa and the pockets could come along and give us an ND filter wheel. Or a variable ND, that'd be pretty cool. Okay, so that's it. But beyond that, it was followed by global shutter. So I guess, read speed is a concern. Then higher frame rates and full frame. Full frame was pretty low on the list. And there were other things beyond that weren't so relevant. What do you think about those features? Let me know in the comments below. The one maybe feature, maybe there's others, the one maybe main feature that I haven't talked about at all is IBIS, so in-body image stabilization. It's not something that I'm just trying to think. I haven't owned a camera with in-body image stabilization before. I've used them, A7S II, but yeah, and we're considering I'm shooting on an X-T3 at the moment. We're considering the X-T4 as a kind of other dual 2-camera option for sort of smaller content. But also that the X-T4, because it does have in-body image stabilization, could make it a really nice little kind of guerrilla, like, you know, when you're shooting on the street, you're just getting a few quick shots and you don't want people to know that you're filming. So you want that little nice high quality camera, and you want to be able to just go handheld and have that shot sort of smoothed out a bit. So, I mean, I'd see IBIS would be, you know, perhaps more some kind of in-body image stabilization being in more demand for that from the the pocket cameras. But like, yeah, I don't know what that would do price wise. And you know, when you're putting cameras on a gimbal, you don't really want a second, like another level of stabilization if you've got a good, like, sometimes it gives this additional float and you're handing over like another layer of control to the tools, and like sometimes that can result in good effects, but sometimes it can be really problematic to having the control that you need over the movement of the image. So I don't know, I think it's one of those features that's good in certain circumstances, and there's other times when you don't want it. So it's not one that I have a huge amount of experience with though, so I don't feel like I can talk with a great authority on the subject matter. So I'd be really interested in what you think about IBIS and the potential for IBIS in Blackmagic cameras. And I think whether it's IBIS, whether it's things going full frame, whether it's continuous autofocus, I think these are features that are going to be very hard for manufacturers to ignore going forward, because people, you know, full frame is kind of the new buzz, and people are finding uses for solid, reliable, continuous autofocus that they would have once written off and never considered using autofocus for. So, you know, I don't know. But still to this day, I think Blackmagic is providing the highest value, most cost-effective, but like also high quality from a image quality perspective solutions in the industry. I still think the only thing that comes close to this at the price point is the C200, but that doesn't do 120 frames per second, and it doesn't have like an intermediate 10-bit. It's got a nasty kind of, not nasty, but it's got an 8-bit codec and a very not very compressed RAW, which looks amazing but creates massive files. So there's nothing quite like this at this price point. Yeah. So other than the issues I've had with this, I'm still really happy being in the Blackmagic camera ecosystem, and I'm really excited and intrigued about what they're going to do next. And I'm not really expecting anything until sometime into 2021. But you know, come May, June 2021, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Blackmagic Design has up their sleeves. Sorry, once again, that was a bit of a rant, guys. Yeah, but we've had this back for a while now. It's working beautifully. I've been off YouTube for the last month. There's been more important things going on, but it's good to be back and posting. And I'm going to put up another video soon that I actually script, and it's going to be very, very, very different. So if you're still here and you're watching, please keep an eye out for that, and let me know your thoughts. Okay, thanks. Speak to you soon. See you later. Oh, I just realized I was like talking over here and the mic's like there. Not very smart, not very smart.